A warm welcome back to all of you, our dearest friends of Radio Mater, to this special appointment of ours dedicated to reading and delving deeper into the writings of the servant of God, Luisa Picareta. In our session today, through our continued reading of the third volume that we have been carefully examining and exploring in these meetings, we want to commence a deeper discussion regarding the essence of what this divine will is. Because Jesus, with Luisa, takes a steady, gradual path, introducing her step by step, little by little, to this sacred knowledge, so that she can then begin to fully live in the divine will. And especially these very first foundational volumes, at least the first 11 of them, truly represent a profound and structured pedagogical journey by Jesus to gradually introduce Luisa to first comprehend the depth of what the divine will is, and then to be able to fully explore and discover this great and magnificent gift of living in the will of God. Then here already, in these sacred passages that we will read together today, we can already begin to glimpse something truly profound. Jesus begins to introduce her to this great and holy mystery, which is the ultimate fulfillment of God's divine plan. Why did God create us? God created us so that we could live eternally with Him and so that He could dwell deeply within us. It is the Trinitarian life flourishing within our souls. It is the divine life that we have already received through the sacrament of baptism. This baptism has truly introduced us into the fullness of the divine life, but it now awaits our own free will to be able to trust completely, to surrender fully, and to merge with Him. This will be the most essential and foundational element in order to live together in true communion with Jesus, to live faithfully for Jesus, with Jesus, and always in Jesus. I would like to begin our reflection today by looking closely at this specific passage from February 21st, 1900, where once again Jesus returns to the profound themes we discussed last time about the practice of mortification, and then he beautifully connects it all to take this step forward in our deeper understanding of living in the divine will. Furthermore, this specific passage from February 21st in the year 1900 is, let us say, also quite a bit amusing in its own way, especially in the sense that Luisa experiences these recurring moments of what I would call spiritual dryness. That is to say, these are difficult moments in which she feels the painful absence of Jesus and the total deprivation of her beloved Jesus. This will be a profound and transformative experience that Luisa will live through for her entire life, but it ultimately becomes a powerful spur to seek Jesus more and more. And this also helps us significantly in our own personal journey of faith. How many times do we too experience this spiritual dryness, this painful sense of deprivation of Jesus in our lives? But we should never allow ourselves to think that Jesus has abandoned us. Rather, we must strive with all our heart and soul. We must, so to speak, actively engage every ounce of our love and devotion to seek Jesus. Just as in the Song of Songs, the bride goes in search of her beloved bridegroom. Because in reality, the life of faith is a constant and never-ending journey of searching for Jesus. We must also remember the pages of the Gospel when Jesus calls the first disciples in the Gospel of John. The question that Jesus asks these disciples of John who are following after him, Jesus' question is, "Whom are you seeking?" This is very much like the poignant question of the risen Jesus to Mary Magdalene in the garden at the empty tomb, as recorded in the 20th chapter of the Gospel of John. "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom is it that you are seeking?" The search for Jesus. And sometimes Luisa searched for Jesus, but she could not find him. And so she lets herself go into some deep and contemplative reflections. And behind Luisa's outpouring, you can truly feel this incredibly deep and tender affection. this profound love of Louisa for Jesus. In fact, she begins her thoughts like this: "This morning, my beloved Jesus started with his customary and familiar delays. May he always be blessed, because he always starts over from the very beginning." It really takes the extraordinary patience of a true saint to put up with him. And you have to deal with Jesus to see just how much patience it takes. Those who haven't experienced it can hardly believe it, and it's almost impossible not to have some grievance or complaint with him. You see, Louisa becomes a little frustrated and upset, and she says, "But Lord, you promised me." The experience of the mystical marriage has sealed this union with Jesus, and then Jesus doesn't show himself. Jesus doesn't come to visit her. She can't speak with Jesus. And this makes her anxious. But Louisa says, so after having so much patience, being truly patient in waiting for him and waiting for him once again, finally he came to her and said to me, "My daughter, the precious gift of purity is not just a natural gift, but it is a divine grace that is only obtained through prayer." Interesting. The divine and precious gift of purity is not merely a simple effort on our part to live in a pure way, but it is a profound grace that is obtained from above. This specific grace of purity is obtained only when I walk in a constant daily relationship with Jesus, truly when I am abiding with Jesus. You see, once again, the entire initiative comes directly from Jesus. Grace comes from Jesus. It is important to recognize that it is not the result of something we can ever hope to achieve on our own through our own limited human efforts. Here we see the whole discussion about the primacy of God in the life of man. In many instances throughout our spiritual journey, we mistakenly reduce our life of faith to something that we believe we have achieved through our own fidelity, our persistent stubbornness, our commitment, and our own human effort. But we must always return to this essential premise. Faith is a profound gift from God. It is a divine grace that is freely obtained through his love. And Jesus goes on to explain, and this is obtained by making oneself truly sympathetic in the literal sense of the word. That is to suffer with sympathy, to suffer with, to live with the same, with the same deep feeling, with the same life as the other. Sympathy. And the mortified and suffering soul becomes sympathetic. Why does it become sympathetic? Because, well, mortification and enduring personal hardship are the sacred path in which one lives everything that Jesus experienced. We must not think, as we've repeated many times, that Louisa seeks suffering because she loves to suffer. She is not a masochist, but rather a deeply devoted person, a faithful woman who loves Jesus so very much, who truly wants to love Jesus completely and entirely, that she is even willing to suffer alongside him in his journey. Oh, how sympathetic the mortified and suffering soul becomes. Oh, how precious she is. And I feel such sympathy that I go crazy for her and give her everything she wants. When you are deprived of me, referring to Louisa's initial words, that she cannot see Jesus, cannot speak with Jesus, cannot be with Jesus. When you are deprived of me, you suffer for my sake, enduring my absence, which is the most painful suffering for you. And I will feel even more sympathy than before and grant you new gifts. You see, it's a pedagogy. Jesus is patiently educating and training Louisa, you see, with these frequent absences of his and these difficult spiritual privations, to shape Louisa's soul more and more with an intense and burning desire to be with him in every moment. The more she longs for him, the more her intense desire grows, because the love that Louisa feels for Jesus is so incredibly profound and deep that she seeks him at all costs. And so we continue our journey forward together, you see, and we take the passage from the 24th day of February, where Jesus begins to speak about the importance of obedience, which is an essential piece of the puzzle, another vital step that must be taken forward. So the act of diligently seeking after Jesus Christ, never stopping in our search for Jesus, the practices of mortification and the endurance of suffering as what unites us more and more to Jesus, but the path is always the path of humble obedience. This morning I found myself filled with fear and uncertainty. I thought that everything was just a product of my imagination and that the devil wanted to deceive me. So I consciously despised everything that I witnessed, and it made me feel incredibly bad. I saw the confessor who set the intention for Jesus to renew in me the pain of the crucifixion, and I tried to resist. At first, the blessed Jesus patiently tolerated me, but since the confessor kept repeating his firm intention over and over, then Jesus said to me, "My daughter, this time we will truly fail in the virtue of obedience. Do you not know that obedience must seal the soul, and that this obedience must make the soul like soft wax, so that the confessor can mold and shape it as he desires?" In this passage, Jesus is telling Louisa, do not resist the call of obedience, but rather yield to it, because this act of obedience is precisely the divine opportunity you have to be molded like soft and pliable wax. It is through this surrender that you allow yourself to be carefully shaped by the guiding hands of the Church, which acts as the instrument of God in this case. We are consistently hesitant to obey instructions. It is more difficult to obey. It is easier to disobey, because by disobeying, we do what we want. Through obedience, we do what the other person wants. And in this case, it is what the Church wants. And since Louisa must entrust herself to the Church, because what the Lord has reserved for her, especially the teachings on the divine will, are a gift for the Church, she must be shaped by the Church. This is why he gave her the assistance of a priest. This is why the Church has always taken care of Louisa. Every one of the bishops who served throughout the entire duration of Louisa's life paid very special attention to her, providing diligent care and constant attentiveness, precisely because they knew this soul had to be carefully guided and formed in accordance with the holy will of God. Thus, Louisa concludes, not paying heed to my resistance, he made me share in the pains of the crucifixion, and I, no longer able to resist all that I did not want, out of fear that it was not Jesus, had to succumb under the weight of the pain. May he always be blessed, and may everything be glorified in all things and always. Let us now carefully examine the next passage, which dates from February 26, 1900. In this specific entry, Jesus begins to speak more clearly about the nature of the divine will. While the physical presence of Jesus might sometimes seem to elude us in our daily lives, the gift of the divine will is something that we are always able to possess and cherish within our souls. This is a significant first point to understand. Living in the divine will is not at all the same as simply living under the secondary effects of something. The specific image that, as we will see, Jesus uses frequently is that of the sun. Not living in the divine will does not mean that one is simply living under the effects of the sun's light and warmth. The sun is the very origin God, and we live under the constant effects of the sun. But living in the divine will means truly possessing the divine will. That is, having it as a personal property, as something we truly own and possess. And so, if we want to make use of this vivid image of the sun, we must not go from living under the direct effects of the sun to instead of just being the sun, having the sun, or living from the sun. After having spent several days deprived, at most, he would sometimes come like a shadow and then slip away. I felt such pain that I was consumed in tears. Blessed and merciful Jesus, being filled with deep compassion for my sorrow, approached me and gazed upon me over and over again, and then he said to me, "My beloved daughter, do not be afraid or troubled, for I promise that I will never leave you. Behold, here is Jesus, who always faithfully keeps his word." And those experiences of deprivation are not because Jesus has somehow overlooked or forgotten Louisa, but because Jesus is actively working deep within Louisa. He is building something truly great. And this also happens to us. When we do not perceive or feel the presence of God within us, it is not that God has abandoned us. We must embrace this moment as an opportunity to strengthen and deepen the sacred bond we share with the Lord, because it is likely that the Lord is working within us. He is actively working deep inside us, even more than he is speaking to us. But when you are no longer in the comfort of my physical presence, Jesus continues, I do not want you to lose heart or become discouraged. On the contrary, from this moment forward, when you find yourself without me, I want you to fully embrace my divine will and find your delight within it, loving me and glorifying me through my will, and cherishing and holding my will close to your heart as if it were my very own person. By doing this, you will truly hold me in your very own hands. Now let us consider this. What is it that constitutes the eternal bliss of paradise? Certainly my divinity. Now what will constitute the happiness of my beloved ones on earth? Certainly, my child, it is my will. So, whenever you feel truly deprived of me, you must say, Jesus, I ask you to take my will as if it were my own person. Because you must understand that the divine will is actually God himself. Take it, and then you will see. Yes, you will see the paradise, and you will live in paradise forever. This will never be able to escape you. Jesus continues to say to the soul, you will always have it safely in your possession. And if you abide within the circle of my will, there you will experience the most ineffable joys and the purest and most exquisite pleasures. The soul, which never departs from the sacred circle of my will, becomes noble and is truly divinized, and all its actions are reflected in the very center of the divine sun. Just as the radiant rays of the sun are reflected upon the surface of the earth, and not a single one ever escapes from the eternal center, which is God. Then Jesus goes on to explain that the soul who faithfully carries out my divine will is the only truly noble queen who is constantly nourished by the very essence of my holy breath. Because she takes her food and drink only from my will, and by nourishing herself with my all-holy will, the purest blood will flow through her veins, her breath will exhale a fragrant perfume that will delight me completely, because it is the product of my very own breath. Do you see where Jesus wants to lead his servant Louisa? Jesus earnestly desires to guide Louisa to share in the very life of God, that same eternal and divine life. And what exactly is this journey of living the divine life if it is not truly living out our faith and fully embracing the grace of our being baptized? Let us always remember that we have truly received the gift of divine life through the sacrament of baptism. Our current task is to live within this sacred divine life. But how can we, as mere human beings, truly live out something that belongs to God? Well, it is only by truly uniting ourselves to Him, only by living from Him, living in communion with Him, living for Him and through Him. You see, we are not really being asked to do who knows what, extraordinary achievements or magnificent works, no. But rather, we are simply being asked to completely place our entire life in God and to live every single moment with God. And then it will be the Almighty who actively works within us, because in our daily life, the divine life will flow forth in a continuous and steady stream. And so our entire life is fully and entirely transformed in God. Therefore, Jesus continues his profound teaching, saying, I want nothing else from you except that you form your entire happiness within the sacred circle of my divine will, never leaving it for any reason, not even for a single brief moment. And this will also be the greatest possible effort, the most significant trial you will face. We know with certainty that the Most Holy Mary has always lived perfectly in the divine will, from the very first moment of her immaculate conception onward through her whole life. But if we consider the contents of the Book of the Queen, that other book that Luisa wrote specifically for the month of May, where the Madonna recounts the intimate and profound conversations Luisa had with her, and where the Madonna tries to explain to Luisa how she always lived in the divine will. At a certain point, the Madonna says, I experience an extraordinarily great trial, which was the greatest trial of my entire life, that of never committing a single act, of never performing even one single act of my life outside of the holy divine will of God. That was her greatest trial. The entirety of our existence must be a life of God, a life lived fully in God. We must never stray beyond the boundaries of this sacred circle, because the very moment we step outside of it, we sever our connection from the divine will of God and thus feed ourselves only with human will, acting solely out of human will, which, as the long history of mankind tells us, leads directly toward its own destruction and ruin. And Luisa continues, while he was saying this, within myself, I felt an alarm and a fear that Jesus' words meant he would not come, that I would have to find peace in his will. Oh God, what mortal pain, what anguish, what tightness in my heart. But Luisa says, so then if he tells me all these things, it means that he wants to abandon me for a while, and so I feel faint. But Jesus now offers her gentle reassurance, remaining always kind, and asks her, but how could I possibly leave you if you are a victim? Jesus says, how can I leave you now that you have given yourself to me completely? On the contrary, you are taking on the role of the victim, that of enduring this suffering together with me. Enduring this suffering together with me. I will never leave you. So I will not come to you when you finally cease to be a victim. But as long as you remain a victim, I will always feel deeply drawn to come. And so, Luisa writes, it truly seems that I have remained perfectly calm, but I feel as if I am completely surrounded by the adorable and holy will of God. Here, Luisa is now describing what she feels and experiences when she is immersed in the will of God. I feel as if I am surrounded by the adorable will of God in such a way that I can no longer find any opening through which to get out. I hope that He always wants to keep me in this circle. It unites me completely to God. And so in the passage from February 27th, 1900, Jesus continues to speak profoundly to the soul about the will of God. He says that complete abandonment and total surrender of oneself in the divine will makes us truly possessed by Jesus, and in turn we possess Jesus himself. And so the soul, thus transformed in the image of Jesus, becomes a sacred place for his rest. As the psalm beautifully reminds us, only in God does my soul find rest, for in him alone is my salvation and my hope. Having completely abandoned myself to the lovable will of our Lord, I saw myself entirely surrounded by my sweet Jesus, both outside and within. You see, it's not just one aspect, my moral aspect, my religious life, my spiritual life, but my whole life, inside and out. The life of God, the life of faith, must involve our whole life. We absolutely must stop living in isolated and separate watertight compartments where there is my religious and spiritual life, And then there is my ordinary, everyday physical life, which takes a completely different direction and has no connection at all. No, the life of God within us must be entirely surrounded by Jesus. I saw myself completely surrounded by my sweet Jesus, both outside and inside. And by having fully surrendered my entire soul in him, I began to perceive clearly, as though my being had become entirely transparent to his light, and wherever I turned my gaze, I saw the supreme goodness of my Lord. But what truly amazed me was that while I saw myself completely surrounded by Jesus, both on the inside and on the outside, I too, my own poor being and my very will, was surrounding Jesus as if within a tight and sacred circle, so that he could not find any opening to get out, because my human will, now perfectly united with his, kept him chained so that he could not possibly escape from me. So when Jesus sees a beautiful human will that truly unites itself with his own divine will, it is as if he is firmly chained by this human will and cannot ever leave that person anymore. He is always present with that soul, and he lives deeply within that soul. Therefore, as you can clearly see, if we truly want to live in a faithful and constant communion with Jesus, we should not just wait for him to reveal his divine presence to us, but when he does, we must humbly unite our own human will and desires to the perfect and holy will of God. And so we will create and establish, we can aid this sacred and mystical spiritual prison, we could say, where Jesus remains deep within us. He can no longer leave, and he will truly never abandon us or leave our side ever again. Oh, how truly admirable is the secret of the divine will of my Lord. The happiness you possess is completely beyond description. Now, while I was in this state, my blessed Jesus spoke these words to me. My daughter, in the soul that is completely transformed in my will, I find a profoundly sweet and peaceful rest. Her soul becomes for me like those gentle and comforting cushions that cause no discomfort to those who seek a moment of peaceful repose. Indeed, even if they were deeply tired or in great pain, the immense softness and the profound pleasure they find in resting upon these objects is so great that, upon waking, they find themselves completely revitalized, strong, and perfectly healthy. This is how I see the soul conform to my will, and as a divine and gracious reward, I allow myself to be bound by her will and make the radiant divine sun shine brightly there at the height of noon. What a beautiful and profound image this is. What this means is that when we conform ourselves, he is carefully employing several very specific and particular terms in this passage. First union, then being united, the nature of the human will, now conformed, and then we will see that the final step is to be consumed. These are all the essential steps that Jesus is gradually having Louisa take in order to establish this merging, this profound fusion between the human will and the eternal will of God, which then leads to living in the divine will. These are the first steps that Louisa is taking. And these steps, dear friends, we can also experience ourselves. In our lifelong journey of faith, we always seek a deep union with Jesus, a true conformity, and even being completely consumed with Jesus. And we will see that what then happens in our daily lives is a renewed life, a brand new life, a life lived according to the Holy Spirit, a truly spiritual life. This is the true spiritual life, not just thinking about profound spiritual concepts and ideas that maybe only give me a fleeting sense of inner peace and tranquility in a moment of storm. No, it is a permanent life, a state that is permanent in a truly permanent way. We must diligently seek the presence of Jesus Christ in order to be with him forever. Everything else that remains is fully accomplished by Jesus within us. And so we come to this passage from the 2nd of March in the year 1900. where precisely this union of wills is what securely binds the human soul to Jesus and allows us to more deeply understand this beautiful union, that which we find difficult to understand, that is the magnitude of suffering, of enduring pain. We have a terrible relationship with suffering. We always try to keep suffering at a safe distance from us, simply because it hurts us so deeply and because it often feels like it destroys us. But if we choose to experience that suffering while united with the suffering of Jesus, if we could truly say that we make our own cross become, yes, we make it become the very cross of Jesus, as Jesus lived it and as we live it united with him, then suffering suddenly takes on a completely different transformative meaning. It becomes the very meaning for which Jesus suffered in the first place, the ultimate salvation of all souls. We participate in his sufferings in order to participate in glory and salvation. We are in full agreement, that is to say, we are true collaborators of Jesus. We suffer alongside Jesus for the eternal salvation of souls. It is not that we take the place of Jesus. No, certainly not. Rather, we live our lives deeply united with him, because it is only in Jesus that we can truly understand the profound salvific value of our suffering. This morning, after having received Holy Communion, my sweet Jesus showed himself to me, hanging upon the cross. I felt my soul entirely drawn to mirror myself in him, to contemplate his suffering and to unite my spirit with his sacred passion. Do you see? Communion is not for setting my conscience at ease. It is for mirroring myself in him so that I may become like him. And what does Jesus do? He mirrored himself in me to draw me into his likeness. You see that the dynamics of this relationship are a seeking of Jesus to be with him, but it is also a seeking by Jesus to be with us, to see each other like two lovers who don't need to say anything to each other. They look at one another, and that look already says everything. And while he was doing this, I felt the pains of my crucified Lord being infused into me. That is, by identifying herself with Jesus, Luisa says, precisely because I have identified myself completely with Jesus, I have conformed myself entirely to Jesus, well, I take everything that is Jesus, and therefore also his sufferings. And with all kindness he said to me, I want your nourishment to be suffering. Not just as suffering, mind you, see, but as the fruit of my will. The most sincere kiss that binds our friendship most strongly is the union of our wills. It is the indissoluble knot that will bind us, that will hold us in continuous embraces. It will be our continuous suffering. And while he was saying this, continues Luisa, the blessed Jesus stripped himself, took his cross, and stretched it out inside my body. And I remained so stretched out that I felt my bones dislocated. Furthermore, a hand, though I cannot say for certain whose it was, pierced my hands and feet, and Jesus, who was sitting on the cross stretched out inside me, was entirely pleased with my suffering and with the one who was piercing my hands. You see, there is this complacency of Jesus, but we must not understand it as Jesus being happy to see us suffer, but rather Jesus who is pleased because he sees a soul that freely, voluntarily, and above all out of love, unites itself with him. And so Jesus says, if you unite yourself with me, I will make you a participant in everything. All the great mystics, all the great saints, when they conformed their lives to Jesus, had to deal with the participation in the cross. But let's think of St. Francis himself. St. Francis is a stigmatized person, just like Padre Pio, just like St. Catherine of Siena, and many other saints. When they live this deep union with Jesus, it is obvious that they also come to experience his crucifixion. They carry the signs of the crucifixion within themselves because they live everything that Jesus lived. We can say that experiencing the sufferings of Jesus is the sign that I have conformed myself totally to him. And then he added, now I can rest peacefully. Do you see? I have reached it. By now you are all in me, Jesus says to Louisa, and I am all in you. And when I live in a soul that gives itself totally to me, I rest. I can rest peacefully. I don't even have to take the trouble of crucifying you, because obedience wants to do everything itself, and I freely leave you in the hands of obedience. By now you and I are one thing. And escaping from the cross, she placed herself upon my heart to rest. Who can say how much I suffered while being in that position? After having been there for a long time, Jesus did not bother to lift me up as he did other times to make me return to my natural state. That hand that had placed me on the cross, I could no longer see. I told Jesus about it and he replied, "But who put you on the cross? Was it perhaps me?" It was obedience, and obedience must take you down. It seems that this time he felt like joking, and by his grace I obtained that blessed Jesus would free me. Obedience becomes what binds Jesus to Louisa. Well, let us take a moment to conclude our reflection in this way, but let us do so with this absolute certainty in our hearts, that the Lord deeply desires to be present with us, and he patiently waits for our only true desire to be to remain with him, so that we may fully participate in his divine life now and forevermore. May Almighty God bless you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Talk to you next Saturday. Have a good day, everyone.